Hello, I'm Graham Fitch, coming to you today from Steinway Hall in London, and I'm going to be talking about texture in piano playing and how we can control the texture. As you might be able to hear, we have some drilling going on in the next room, so I apologize for that. There's nothing really I can do about it except play perhaps just a little stronger to cover it over. In my last demonstration, I talked about melody and accompaniment, where one hand was stronger than the other. Let me just go back over that little Schumann example that you will have heard before. Remember that one? My right hand needs to be stronger and my left hand needs to be softer. But that's not always the case when we're controlling texture at the keyboard. Now, let's look at the very first invention of Bach, which I'm sure many of us were brought up on. In this piece, the right hand and the left hand are absolutely equal. We don't want to play the one hand any louder than the other. It would be a mistake to play the right hand louder than the left. I'm not saying that each hand has got to be relentlessly the same dynamic level as the other. There could be a moment where the right hand or the top voice perhaps a little bit more dominant and the left hand just a little bit less, but basically those are on the same level. I often get asked about the harpsichord, and people say, oh, the harpsichord is such an inexpressive and mechanical instrument, which it is not. And the music that was written for it is not mechanical either. Now let me just talk a little bit about textures where you've got three parts going on simultaneously. The first piece that I played, the Bach invention, is two parts. This extract from the Goldberg Variations number 19 is in three voices. What I'd like to draw your attention to there is, again, I'm not playing any one of those three voices louder than the others, but I am using different touches. And this is what's important. The articulation of each line is really important when it comes to the texture that I want to make. So, the bass voice here, I'm separating, just lightly separating. So, a non-legato. Now the middle voice is not terribly legato either, but the notes, the sounds are connected. Now the top voice, I'm playing with a tenuto. And when I put those all together, what you hear, rather than one being louder than the other, you hear different textures, different touches from each of the voices. And so on. Now, let's move on to the slow movement of Beethoven's Sonata in A, Opus 2, number 2, where again, we have the sense that all four of the voices of the parts here are working together, so that we don't have the sense of a strong top. Let me just play you a little bit of it. I hear this as a string quartet. So these are the upper voices, upper parts. Violins 1 and 2. You hear that I'm blending my sounds there. When I add my pizzicato cello, more from the cello there. Now the first violin Basically there, Beethoven's thinking the sounds of a string quartet, not the sounds of a solo voice and an accompaniment. And this is really important when we look at our music. Are the parts cohesive, or have we got a solo voice? Let's look a little bit now at Mozart's evergreen K545 C Major Sonata, which will need no introduction to any of you, I'm sure. We can agree that the Alberti bass at the beginning needs to be softer than the top melody. There's no doubt about that. What I'm doing is playing my left hand softer. I do, however, have a choice as to what texture, what type of sound I want to make there. Do I want something that's like a soft velvet carpet for my singer to glide across? If I do, let me show you what that sounds like first. Now I'm not pedaling that with my foot, I'm pedaling that with my fingers, which means that I'm leaving the fingers lying around at the bottom of the key. It's known as finger pedaling. Now, let's say I didn't do that, and I just played with a clear articulation. So instead of my singer gliding on velvet, my singer is walking on gravel. It's still in the background, it's still soft. Now in that passage, you can hear that the left hand is very much less important than the right hand. The right hand's getting involved in all these arabesques. And the left hand's really just supplying a little bit of harmony and a little bit of rhythm. Now, when we come to the next subject, the left hand weaves in and out. It starts off fairly importantly because it's just by itself. Then it comes a little bit. In the bar where the right hand stops being, well, actually it doesn't happen at all, the right hand has a little bit of a breather. The left hand emerges. So it's not really a question of saying it's the right hand that's the tune and the left hand's the accompaniment. It varies. If we look at this section from a little bit later, actually where I just stopped. Do you hear what's going on there? My right hand and my left hand are in dialogue. Interestingly, if we look at the design of this, the right hand sometimes comes down, sometimes goes up, Do you hear that? There's a little bit of a feeling of up and down in the right hand, but the left hand always goes up and going up. So there's a feeling that the left hand is almost cajoling the right hand into keeping its energy up. Now in the next spot, when that passage finishes, the left hand, even though it is the accompaniment, is still really important to the energy level. So I wouldn't play this necessarily that much softer. Alberti. Now, I wonder why Mozart didn't write something instead of this. Why didn't he write another Alberti along these lines? He could have done that, but again, there's an energy change in the left hand that we have to respond to. I guess what I'm coming to is the idea that just because the left hand is an accompaniment or in the background, that it's somehow unimportant. It's the content of the left hand, how it contributes to the big story, the whole picture. In the second part of this demonstration, I'm going to talk about three layered textures and how we can deal with those. Join me again for